I think a lot of people want that job because of what it says on the badge. But I think, once you're in it, you have to have that. You have to have that humility. You have to realize that, um, that's a job that you're in. And I see so many of my peers, let that job define them. It becomes who they are. And one of my, I don't know if you ever knew Greg Burfitt. He was a
Yes.
big with Tenet Healthcare. He's one of my mentors, and I remember he said you quickly go from who's who to who's that.
The business of healthcare is hard, creating a badlands of terrain that is difficult to navigate. Some think the most brilliant minds in business are on Wall Street. They are wrong. The most brilliant minds are in healthcare. They have to be to thrive and survive. This podcast explores concepts in leadership, management, sales, and negotiation with those brilliant minds. The Healthcare Badlands podcast is generally planned, but unscripted, unedited, and uncut, so you get the honest and unfiltered experience. Your host is Dr. Tom McDougall, a 30-year veteran of healthcare with 23 years of hospital CEO experience. His guests are carefully selected experts from across the industry. They offer insights, expertise, and some great real-life, often hilarious stories. Now, let's jump into the episode.
Welcome to the Healthcare Badlands podcast. Today we have Jon-Paul Croom, who is the president of Wellstar North Fulton Hospital in Roswell, Georgia, where he's served as the organization leader since 2017. Jon-Paul has a long career of hospital leadership all across the Southeast. He has a bachelor's degree from Mercer University and a master's degree in healthcare administration from UAB. He is also the past president of ACHE Georgia. I'm excited about the insights that Jon-Paul is going to share with us today. So welcome to the podcast, Jon-Paul.
Tom, great to be here. Great to see you.
Well, thank you for investing time in our listeners. Got some questions for you. First question I have is about your approach to team building with the C-suite and the department managers in your organizations. Talk to me about how you approach that and the values that you are really striving to accomplish.
Yeah, so I mean, I think like a lot of, hospital administrators, probably at their age or stage in my career, we've developed over time. I think for me, it was something that was said to me by a mentor early on. And, when, I was young and starting out as a COO, it was, you've got these department managers and you will never know their jobs like they know their jobs. You're never going to be experts in those areas. But you have to learn to trust and manage people. And I think for me, it's always been a sense of, humility and understanding that, we're all in this together. We have to work together. I'm never going to know knowledge that my pharmacy director has. My current pharmacy director is probably one of the smartest people I've ever worked with. But I don't know that business. I know a little bit about it. I know enough to get in trouble. I've done this, the same with lab and, all of my other, ancillary support, physician service line, areas, but, you're never going to know everything. And I think, the first part of that is just, developing trust with your leaders, working really hard to choose the right leaders when those opportunities come up. And overall just having, on top of that, just having transparency with your leaders. I think, I've always, felt successful with plain talk. Um, I think that most of the people we work with at this level are pretty smart and they know if you're trying to sue them. And, I think it's better just to, talk about what the real issues are, what the challenges are, celebrate the successes, and bring them in as part of the team. And that's both for our managers and our senior team.
Excellent. This episode is sponsored by CO Management Solutions, a revenue cycle company you may not have heard of, but you need to hear this. There is little healthcare organizations can do about inflation-related expenses, but you can make sure you are collecting 100% of the revenue you have earned. CO uses AI and the latest technology paired with an efficient team to aggressively collect your hard-earned revenue at an attractive commission. Start today with a free analysis of what you are leaving uncollected and recover that revenue with CO. For more information, Visit COMS.com. That is SCIOMS.com. A link is provided in today's episode notes. Have you had any moments that I would refer to them as wow moments, where a leader in your organization has come up with a solution or an idea that impressed you and was one that you hadn't thought of before?
But yeah, I mean, all the time. I think, I think most of my, most of those moments, when I get really excited, sometimes it is those leaders who are able to, determine a strategy or, follow a strategy through and build a new service line or grow business. But I think for me, what I really enjoy seeing is when I have a COO and a CFO that are well connected, even when they're even better connected to each other than connected to me, because it's that teamwork for me that is that success. It's not. I think our relationships with our direct reports are important, but it's way more important to me that our direct reports, work well together, develop that team. It's great to see a COO developing something, but they're doing it alongside and planning with the CFO. Um, bringing a plan to our senior team meetings that they've already, put together. So I think all of those things have been, I guess, wow moments over the years for me.
Yeah, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the importance of your daily activities in terms of team building and team development?
I think the importance of it is probably a 10. Um, the fulfillment of that duty can be challenging sometimes. I think we all get tied up in, different areas, and we're built to want to be out there, building teams every day. It gets a little difficult. But I think for me, I would say, yeah, it's probably the most important thing we do because, as leaders, one of the things I say all the time, especially new leaders, I'll say, you got here because of something you did really well. You did, well in your department. You were promoted, you're a manager, but now, at this point in your career, it's not just what you do, it's how you lead other people and how you lead them to do what you need them to do because you'll never have that amount of time to do that. And I think that is the constant challenge of leadership, both for new leaders and old leaders like me. Identifying those people that can move that mission.
Excellent. All right, next question. And this is a curious question that I have is that I mentioned in your introduction that you've been in your current role since 2017. And it was curious to me because that is 3 times the national average for tenure of hospital CEOs. And we all see that. We see a lot of turnover in C suites now at hospitals, and that has created a series of interesting dynamics and challenges. And that has accelerated over the last few decades. It used to be healthcare executives were in their role for an extended period of time, and now that's not happening as much. So, talk to me about, in terms of your tenure there, how do you attribute your success to staying in your role for such an extended period of time, bucking the national average?
Before I answer that, the first comment I would have is just on the statistics themselves. I know that I did, and I know you did, and many hospital executives, early in their career, you get your first CEO job at a hospital, and it's usually a smaller hospital, and you're probably not planning to be there for a number of years. I know you and I both worked for profits for a number of years, and there is a difference, I think, in that longevity between for profits and not for profits. I think part of it is because, when I worked in the for profit industry, there were just so many opportunities all the time. And, you would work somewhere a few years and there would be a bigger hospital and you'd have another opportunity. just because the companies are so large. And when you're younger and mobile, it's easier to make those moves. I think in the not-for-profit industry, I've only been in one. I'm with Wellstar now. I I've been here 8 years, and I think coming in, this was a place we wanted to live geographically. A company I wanted to work for. I think part of it I think part of the longevity is the willingness of the leader to stay in that organization or in that position. Um, and the other part of it is, there are external factors that affect that too, because I mean, frankly, it's not always our decision whether we stay, in a position for a long period of time. And 8 years is surprising. That's I think as we get older, that time seems shorter, and it doesn't feel like 8 years. But you're right. I'm kind of on the long end of this position. Um, I think part of the challenges most face are we have constant financial challenges and regulatory challenges and workforce challenges. There are a lot of pressures. It's a high pressure environment. And I think that, I mean, I know that people that have not done this, that have not run a hospital, really don't truly understand. And I think sometimes people that are close to it believe that it is something that is not high pressure as it seems, but it is. It's a, you have to be able to roll with it. I think it's difficult for any hospital president or CEO to maintain that longevity, because things change. You will never get your organization exactly the way you want it, because as soon as that happens, I would, in my own experience, I would say, I had probably the best executive team that I've ever had. And within the space of 1 year, I had my COO left to go run a hospital, which was the right thing to do for her career, and I was completely supportive of that. My CFO got promoted to a larger financial position, and that happened a few months after my COO left. My chief nursing officer um, took a larger position up in the Northeast, and all of this happened within about a period of 12 months. So I I think with any executive, any organization, if they're humble enough to admit it, they know that their success is not because of what they did; it's because of the team they put together. And the challenges from going to a fully high functioning team that has worked together for 4 years to having to kind of rebuild, that can be a real challenge, and that's a lot of pressure. I think I'm trying to guess the rest of your question about why am I still here. I
I didn't
think
ask it that way, but go ahead.
um, I think some of it, frankly, for me personally, has been the geography. We live on the north side of Atlanta, this community. I hit the age where I had children that were in high school to elementary school. And now I'm still sort of in that stage where I've got children in college and high school. So, kind of drawing toward the end of that. But um, that's a big factor, I think. And people make different decisions in their lives on when to move families and when not to. And, it's been I think it's been a good decision for me. I've enjoyed being here at this facility. I've always wanted to be a hospital CEO. I do get the question sometimes, are you interested in going to, a corporate level or overseeing multiple hospitals? And my answer is always, not at this time. I think what drives me every day, and you talked about, being out there and doing team building. For me, it's, reconnecting every day to that purpose of why we're here. I feel I'm lucky in the sense that I can walk out of this door and I can walk to 50, 60 different departments, and I can go talk to people I've known for years, um, either about, what they're doing or about their families. And, there's a personal connection that is special that I've had here. And I've had at other hospitals, but something about the amount of time, they've seen my children grow up. I've seen their children grow up. It's been it's nice to be able to connect to the reason that we're here, connect to the people that are our patients. Many of our patients in this community, even though we're, in a very populated suburb, or, I know a lot of the families of the patients. I get calls every day. So there's a real personal connection to what we do. When we do it well, we hear about it. When we don't do it well, everybody hears about it.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
there's a, I think there's something special about that, and that's probably part of the longevity as well. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Not many of us stick. I think right now I think as of last year, I'm the longest serving hospital president within Wellstar. And I didn't feel that old until until I
Yeah,
realized that. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of amazing. Yeah, back I guess 98 to 2010, I was with CHS and
Yeah.
in Division 1 the entire time, and ran 3 different hospitals for David Miller during that time period. But I used to tease him because when I got to the 6 year mark, and I was there 12
Yeah.
years, but when I got to the 6 year mark, I was the longest tenured CEO
Yeah.
anywhere in the division.
Yeah.
The ongoing joke became that he couldn't figure out how to get rid of me, because I just kept hanging around. But it definitely has changed. So, definitely a tribute to what you've accomplished. In terms of, and we probably have a number of listeners that are earlier in their career, what advice would you give for them, in terms of kind of planning and mapping out their career path? What should they expect? And what things should they be valuing as they approach their career planning?
Yeah. So, I have had the fortune of having three administrative fellows over the past 4 years. And, that's something I'd love to talk about if we have time. But it is, I've answered this question a lot with them, this advice. I mean, generally what I do, and it depends on the person, but most of my fellows have come through and they want to run hospitals. They're not necessarily interested in, working service line or clinics. And that's part of the reason, when I choose a fellow, I want somebody that, wants to do that. And typically what I've talked to them about is the importance of being flexible, especially with your career. It is easy. I call, kind of where we live here. This is an easy place to fall in love with, and you want to. We have a lot of support. It's a great area. But when you're young, and I know, not all of us are young when we start that path, but people that are young and have the opportunity to make those moves geographically, I think it's important. It just opens up your ability to experience many different, facilities, many different health systems in a relatively short time. It can be difficult if you lock yourself down and say, okay, I just came out of grad school and I'm going to stay here in Atlanta for the rest of my career. It's more difficult. Not that it can't be done. It's just it may take longer. Um, but usually, younger people that have the ability to make those moves quickly before their families start growing, it's important. And that flexibility is important. Be open to opportunities. Be open to talking to people in places you may thought you never would have lived. And there's something to be learned everywhere. Um, the other thing is, kind of as I talked about earlier, is just, as grow into management, you need to realize that all those skill sets you have to make sure that You have to realize that you're not going to be able to make everything happen. Your world grows to a point that you can't control it by yourself, and you have to develop the trust. You have to hold your team members accountable. It's important to develop good relationships, but you have to balance that with that accountability piece. And that's something I think all leaders have to learn. I mean, it's great to be close, great to have good friendships, but at the same time, you have to make those hard decisions, and that can be difficult. And for young leaders who are interested in doing this type of thing, I would say just keep your options open. I mean, look at every opportunity. Ask your mentors about opportunities before you go and take them. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of positions that I've encouraged people not to take for whatever reason, and most of it's just questions. Is this what you want to do? Is this where you see your career going in the next 5 to 10 years? If not, you don't need to do it just because they're going to pay you this. You have to determine like where you have to set a marker for yourself out there in the future and work toward that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I was sitting here reminded of a story. Um, I took my first hospital CEO job when I was 27, joined CHS when I was 29, and about 3 years after that, I was sitting in my office at my first CHS hospital, and Bill Hussey. Did you know Bill?
I knew him. I
Okay,
did.
Bill,
Not well,
Bill,
but I was in this. Yeah, he was with, yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Bill joined CHS and became an assistant vice president in Division One, and that's how I got to know Bill before he became a president of one of the divisions for CHS. But he was sitting in my office one day, and we were just chit chatting, and he sat back in his chair and he looked at me and he said, "Tom, what's your 10-year plan?" And honest to goodness, Jon-Paul, I was sitting there thinking, well, I'm a CEO for 5 years at age 32. I think things are okay. And I told him, I said, I don't have a 10-year plan. He said, you have to have one. You have to have one now. And I was a little stunned by it. And I thought, is he trying to tell me something? Do I need to be looking for a job? I mean, what's going on with this?
Yeah,
And yeah, I was having one of those moments.
what's your 10
I
day
was
plan?
I was looking for the box under my desk. I was like, do I
Yeah,
need a box?
yeah,
Um, but what Bill said is he said, your 10-year plan should be an idea about what you want to be doing 10 years from now in terms of the position you have in the organization that you want to work for in a location that is preferable to you with the type of boss that you want. So four things. And he said, you need to have an idea what that looks like. And I said, yeah, I think I'm good. And he said, no, Tom, you have to have a plan. He said, because when your phone rings tomorrow, how do you know whether or not you're going to listen? And I thought, okay, I can see what he's referring to. And his entire point is that if you don't know where you want to be 10 years from now, how do you make a decision today, tomorrow, next week, next month, a year from now in terms of your career growth? And I always thought it was excellent advice that he gave me. And he finished it with, let's say you do get a call tomorrow and you accept a job that's inconsistent with your 10-year plan. He said, before you take the job, you got to decide how your 10-year plan is changing.
yeah.
And it was just that longer term vision that I always valued Bill for imparting that wisdom with me. But it was interesting. All right, I want to pivot to kind of along those lines and talking about leadership. I know that you talked to a group of executives in the last few months, and the topic was about the loneliness of being a hospital CEO or
Uh,
CEO in general.
uh-huh.
Would you mind sharing with us your wisdom and your thoughts that you shared with that group?
Sure. Yeah. My thoughts are, you know, being reflective and thinking back to what I thought a hospital CEO was before I was in this position is much different than what it is now. But, I've come to understand, my former CEOs that I've reported to over the years, some of who continue to be mentors, but I understand their positions and their decisions and things they said now better than I did then. But it's a lonely place, and it's not something that we talk about a lot. We do talk about it among ourselves. I'll say that, when I was with, Tenet and HMA and CHS and Wellstar, some of my closest confidants are people that do the same thing I do. But, the reality is when you're in charge of a whole organization, you can, you can develop, obviously good relationships with your direct reports. You can be, open about your challenges. You can be, celebrate successes together. But I mean, we're human. And there are times that, as an executive, you feel as though maybe in one particular area you have failed and you're not getting this done, or you're trying to, you're trying to, figure out what the solution is. And it's challenging because there's certain emotions and things you cannot share with those people that are direct reports.
Absolutely.
People will say, oh, you got to be transparent about everything, but you're not going to go into your senior team and say, oh my gosh, I've been banging my head all night. I think we're going in the wrong direction in this area and we're doomed. And, even though it's not true, those are your thoughts and those are your feelings. And you got to be careful about that because you can quickly sow, a sense of, foreboding among your team, which is one of the worst things to do. The other thing is, we all have bosses. We all have people we report to. You got to be very careful about that too. You don't want to leave your team feeling, helpless. And I talk to, new managers about this all the time. It's like, it is so easy, like as a new nurse manager, when you have a team coming in and they're like, well, we're understaffed, or, we don't, we have too much, work on us, or we're not getting paid enough, or whatever it is. It's very, very easy as a manager to sit there and say, yeah, you know what, guys, you're absolutely right. It's these executives. They're just not letting us do it. But I'm with you guys. I'm supportive of you, and you
Uh,
become
You,
a, and the,
you can say it. It's just necessarily not
yeah.
anything more than a career limiting move.
It is career limiting, and what it does is, and I try to explain to them, I was like, you're going to become a martyr, and they're going to love you in the moment. But what happens is your team suddenly feels completely hopeless because their one connection to, administration, or whoever that vague group is that's going to make everything better. Your one connection is telling you, I agree with you guys, and there's nothing we can do. I mean, it is it causes one of the worst, it's like anti-team building. So and I think even at this level, I mean, hopefully, by the time people become hospital CEOs, they've kind of figured out that's not the, you can't do that. And you may think it, but you just can't say that out loud. I think, but I think it's tough, and I think a lot of people don't understand that isolation. And for me, it's important to develop those connections with other leaders, not just in your own company, but part of the reason I became so active with ACHE is there are so many other people that with other companies that do the same thing I do day to day, and it's nice sometimes to have general, not specific, but general conversations, and have that understanding that other people are just like you, that they're feeling the same thing. One of the other thing I always have, thinking, one of the things you were talking about, 10-year plan, is sometimes I'll ask that question. Every once in a while, somebody will say, I was like, what do you want to do in 10 years? I want to be sitting in your chair. And my first question is like, why?
Exactly.
And they'll be like, I was like, you have no idea. I was like, because I look at them and I was like, you guys, you got the perfect life. You get to go home. Nobody calls you on the weekend. It is, you don't have to, think every day about, we have 1,500 team members here. And, well, one of them could choose to do the wrong thing or mess up, and they do every day, and you have to deal with that. And that is, it's different when you just work, when it's just you.
Yeah.
It
No,
changes when you have
absolutely.
lots of people. Yeah.
Yeah, my normal response is to tell someone, say, you really can't understand until you've sat in the chair, uh, because the amount of pressure, the amount of stress, the amount of accountability, responsibility, I would carry around every day just this feeling of responsibility for every single person associated with the organization. Was that unhealthy? Probably. Did I need
Yeah.
therapy? Some days. It was just, it had that intensity, but I caught myself subconsciously on those really hard days. I would just call a colleague that was a CEO at another hospital, not necessarily with any intent or purpose, but I think I wanted to hear that somebody else in a similar role was dealing with some of the really tough challenges and difficult questions to answer. And it's that foxhole mentality. If I'm not in the foxhole by myself, then perhaps it's survivable.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting field to be in. Of course, last year I got out of running hospitals. I'm not ever going back. I'm done with that. But it took me months to decompress, and I didn't even understand and realize the amount of stress I was carrying around until one afternoon I was sitting on my porch and I thought, "Gosh, I kind of feel relaxed," and I was uncomfortable. I thought, "Why do I feel
Uh-huh.
relaxed?" It was almost odd after, 23 years as a hospital CEO. Now I don't do that anymore, and I didn't understand and realize what it was doing. And my wife made me promise. She said, if you get out of it, you're never going back, ever.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
trying to figure out why she suggests that. We've been married 31 years, so she knows me better than any person on earth. I said, "Why are you so insistent on that?" And she said, "Because I have seen what it does to you. I have seen, how it impacts you. I have watched you, work like a dog. I've watched you, carry around everybody's responsibilities." She said, "When everybody else thinks you're calm and cool and everything's under control, I can see it in you. I can see that pressure is on you. You're just not showing it to everybody else." Uh, I when I took that first hospital CEO job at 27, I did think for about 6 weeks, I was like, "That's pretty cool. Under my name on my badge, it says CEO." And I
Yeah.
proceeded to
Yeah.
spend the next 23 years wishing somebody else had that on their badge.
Yeah.
Um, but it's an honor, it's a privilege, but it also comes at a cost. So I admire you for the time you invest in it.
Yeah,
Um,
I think a lot of people want that job because of what it says on the badge, but I think, once you're in it, you have to have that humility. You have to realize that, um, that's a job that you're in. And I see so many of my peers let that job define them. It becomes who they are. And I don't know if you ever knew Greg Burfitt. He was a
yes.
big with Tenet Healthcare. He's one of my mentors. And I remember he said you quickly go from who's who to who's that. And and
That's
I
awesome.
and what's interesting about it is so true, whether somebody retires or whether we leave one hospital, go to the next. I mean, within 3 to 6 months, people will remember your name, but you're not the C. There's somebody else that's doing that. So it's not you. It's the position's always going to be there. The person's not. Even though I've had good friends I've developed over the years, I mean, the reality is it can't define you because, at the end of the day, all you're going to have after all these years is your family. And I say this to young people too that are, working or have taken their first CEO jobs is, you're not going to remember that great speech you made at medical executive committee, or nobody's going to remember how you were able to redirect this, very busy surgeon from one of your competitor hospitals into yours. But you are going to remember the ballet lessons. You're going to remember the soccer, tryouts. You're going to remember, camping in the, freezing weather up in North Georgia with your boys and Boy Scouts. That's the stuff that they're going to remember. That's stuff you'll remember. And all this other stuff is, you have to kind of, and it's hard. And I'm talking like I actually do that well. And I don't, but I work very hard to do it better. But I think that, part of that loneliness is making sure you, keep those connections with family and friends. And I know Tom, you and I both know plenty of people whose, lives are much, different. I mean, they didn't, they're not married to the same person they started with. They have different, and it's tough, and it can eat you up if you're not careful.
No, you're absolutely correct. That's outstanding advice. Jon-Paul, thank you so much for the time you've invested today. I really appreciate insights you've shared, and congratulations on your extremely successful career. And thank you for investing time in others to help them develop, help them to be successful in their careers as well.
Tom, thank you very much. I appreciate you inviting me onto the podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Healthcare Badlands podcast. As always, please like and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. If you have suggestions for topics or guests, please email those to podcast@badlands.pro. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered legal advice. Some information shared may include fictitious names. The opinions expressed are solely those of the host and/or guests and are their own and not reflective of the opinions of others or our sponsors. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you'll join us on the next episode of the Healthcare Badlands podcast. Until then,